It has been determined that the philosophical origins of phenomenology date back to the Greek philosopher Plato, specifically in his literary work, The Allegory of the Cave. Plato presented the idea that what an individual understands to be reality is only a reflection or shadow of the phenomena of true reality. It was not until the 18th and the 19th centuries that the concept of phenomena began to emerge in philosophical thought. Phenomena were construed as things that took place in the human mind, rather than objective realities that can be observed. Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher who was prominent in the late 18th century, believed and emphasized that this thing as it exists in reality is separate and not easily perceived by the human senses. All throughout the 19th century, there were other German philosophers who shared parallel ideologies with Immanuel Kant, such as George Hegel, who believed that phenomenology was a way for one's mind to articulate what was experienced. Another German philosopher and psychologist of the 19th century was Franz Brentano. Brentano believed that every mental act is related to some object, implying that all perceptions have meaning. 20th century Europe was a time in history that was labeled as the era of contemporary philosophy. Up until this point in time in philosophical history, the popular framework was attributed to Cartesian tradition, referring to the works of Rene Descartes, father of modern philosophy, who believed in the existence of a world of bodies external to the mind, as well as the dualistic distinction of the immaterial mind from the body. This is at the peak of the professionalization of philosophy across Europe, giving rise to the birth of various ideological and philosophical movements, including phenomenology. Other philosophical movements that emanated during this era include, but not limited to, logical positivism, existentialism, Marxism, structuralism, and post structuralism, just to name a few. Despite philosophical beginnings that were shaped by Cartesian tradition, the German philosopher Edmund Husserl is credited with the initial development of phenomenology, hence recognized as the prime mover of the phenomenological movement. He believed that to understand human thought and experience, one must undergo rigorous and unbiased study of things as they appear. As a student of Franz Brentano, Husserl further developed his thinking. He argued that it is intentionality as the distinguishing trait of consciousness. Husserl also assumed that a phenomenon can only exist when there is a subject who experiences the phenomenon, implying that meaning is projected onto the object by the perceiving subject. Husserl's work led to the development of eidetic or descriptive phenomenology. Descriptive phenomenology aims at describing a phenomenon's general characteristics rather than the individual's experiences. In other words, the context of the experience is disregarded and the focus is shifted on the experience alone. A core element of descriptive phenomenology is that extraneous factors such as religious or cultural thoughts and beliefs should be put aside before one can understand the phenomenon at its purest sense. This is coined bracketing. Martin Heidegger, one of Husserl's pupils, disagreed with him and further developed his thought processes. Heidegger believed that what is to be uncovered is not the essence of the phenomenon, but the being of the phenomenon. Heidegger also posited that to see beyond the normal, everyday meanings of life enables one to see the larger meanings in the being. Heidegger eventually became founder of the interpretive phenomenological movement. Interpretive phenomenology, also known as hermeneutics, has four main core concepts. First is the sein, or being in the world, which refers to a situated activity in which things are encountered and managed, implying that we are already embedded in a world of meaning. For structure, which basically refers to prior awareness or a pre-understanding, or simply what is known before the interpretation. Life world existential themes refer to the life as lived and its corresponding themes. And finally, the hermeneutic circle, which refers to the manner in which interpretation through understanding is achieved by the circular process of a continuous re-examination of the propositions. Husserlian and Heideggerian schools of thought were eventually critiqued, improved, and further developed by their contemporaries and by their students. For instance, Hans Georg Gadamer, also a German philosopher, inspired the development of an interpretive method that allows a researcher to discover meaning and understanding between the written text and that researcher's interpretation. Nevertheless, the popularity of Husserl, Heidegger, and Gadamer reached the other parts of Europe, paving way to the emergence of their French counterparts, like Maurice Merleau-Ponty, whose work was highly influential in the field of medicine, particularly his concept of embodied consciousness, focusing on the inseparability between mind and body. His themes include lived space, lived time, lived body, and lived human relations. Descriptive or Husserlian phenomenology involves the description of things as they appear. Hence, it is important to study motivations of people as their actions are made based on the perceptions of what is real. When studying others, researchers must put aside their preconceived ideas that might influence the outcome. And while all of us have lived an experience, there's only one interpretation. Interpretive phenomenology, on the other hand, focuses on the understanding and or the interpretation of experiences. Thus, it is important to study the experience instead of the people of the event. It looks at what people experience and not what they consciously know. And it is difficult for us to separate ourselves from the world we are immersed in.